A condemned house. No water, no heat, no working electricity. Rotting floorboards you could see straight through into the basement. And a young woman who had never done structural work in her life, standing in the middle of it all, holding a bill of sale that said she paid $1. That woman is Tia Weston, and the story that followed, the one her audience watched play out every Sunday morning on YouTube, is not the one most people think it is. By the end of this, you'll understand what was actually at stake when her father got in a car and drove from Kentucky to rural North Dakota, and why that decision turned a condemned house into something neither of them could have done alone. Tia Weston grew up in Fairdale, a small suburb outside Louisville, Kentucky. Her parents were Brad and Cindy. She had a younger brother named Brent. It was an ordinary upbringing in a working-class community. Nothing about it suggested she'd one day become the face of a renovation movement built around abandoned houses in one of the most rural states in America. After school, she found work in health insurance. A steady job, a steady paycheck, and eventually a mortgage on her first home in Louisville. On paper, it was exactly what you were supposed to do. Buy a house, build equity, settle in. That was the plan. Then the pandemic hit. The health insurance salary that had felt stable suddenly felt very different when the mortgage reminder arrived every month. Tia has spoken about this period directly and in her own words. "I was living paycheck to paycheck," she said, "and the mortgage is so high. The job was still there. The house was still there. But the math had stopped working, and she could feel it every single month." She made a decision that most people her age wouldn't make. She sold the Louisville house, took what equity she had and left. Not for another city she already knew. Not for somewhere with family close by. She moved to North Dakota, a state where she had no roots, no construction contacts, and no prior experience doing anything beyond basic home maintenance. She was in her mid-20s. She was doing this alone. Most people who know this story stop here. But the real story starts right now. North Dakota was not a random choice, though from the outside it might have appeared that way. Property was cheap, the kind of cheap that hadn't existed in Louisville for years. In rural North Dakota, the math was genuinely different. A house that needed work could still be acquired for a price that made the renovation numbers work. She found a house for $60,000, bought it, renovated it herself, and sold it. The profit came out to $30,000. That number matters, not because it made her financially comfortable, but because it proved that the model was real. Buy something undervalued, do the work, walk away ahead. But the first flip also taught her something nobody puts in the highlight reel. Renovation work is not linear. There are jobs you can research online and figure out as you go. Tiling, painting, flooring, trim work. And then there are structural problems. The kind that live inside walls and under roof lines that punish you badly for getting them wrong. She was learning on the job, and she knew it. The $30,000 profit from that first flip didn't go into a savings account. It went straight into the search for her next project. And when that search led her somewhere she didn't expect, that's when everything changed. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. The second property search didn't go smoothly. The first house she tried to buy fell through almost immediately. Inspections revealed foundations too compromised to risk, and the deal collapsed before it started. That's a discouraging moment for anyone. For a woman who had already sold everything she owned in Louisville to fund this move, it hit differently. But the seller of that failed deal mentioned something almost as an afterthought. He had another property, a small house where he'd grown up as a child. He hadn't been able to bring himself to demolish it or sell it to strangers. The town had made a practical decision. Earmark it for fire training. Local firefighters were going to burn the structure down as a controlled practice exercise. That was the plan. He said he would basically give this house away if someone was willing to fix it rather than watch it burn. Tia offered $1. He accepted. She walked through for the first time and, by her own account, loved it immediately. She looked past the rotting sections of floor, past the roof where daylight was coming through, past the walls that were visibly failing, the missing electrical, the dead plumbing, the bones of a house that hadn't been lived in properly in years. She saw what it could become. The house had no working water, no functioning heat, no usable electrical system. It was a project that required skills she didn't yet have, and a timeline that left very little room for learning slowly. She called her dad. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got. Until now. Brad Weston drove from Kentucky to North Dakota. That's not a weekend trip. He packed up, made the drive, and he stayed. What almost no coverage of Tia's story has actually examined is what his presence meant structurally. not just emotionally. Tia has been consistent and honest about the fact that she had no formal construction training before this project began. She was learning as she went, episode by episode, problem by problem. The audience was watching her figure things out in real time, and that raw authenticity is a huge part of why the channel connected so strongly with viewers. But there's a meaningful difference between learning to lay tile and repairing a roof on a house built in 1924 with sections that have been rotting for years. She and her father replaced sections of the roof together. What's worth knowing is that most of the original 1924 timber shingles were actually still sound, which tells you something about the quality of how the house was originally built. But the sections that had really failed. Roof repair done wrong means every cosmetic improvement you make inside becomes vulnerable. Water finds its way through anything. And a bad repair on a century-old roof isn't something you notice immediately. It shows up 6 months later in the walls. Brad knew how to do it right. He had the kind of practical construction knowledge that doesn't come from videos or tutorials. It comes from decades of hands-on experience, from having fixed things when they broke, and learned what the mistakes look like before they become expensive. That knowledge was exactly what Tia needed in those early structural weeks. And that's when the decision was made, the one nobody around her saw coming. The pair completed the full renovation in 37 weeks. That number deserves a moment. This was a house with no water, no heat, and no electrical. A house that was condemned. A house the local fire department had literally been planning to burn. And 2 people, one with no formal training, one with practical knowledge and a willingness to show up, finished it in under 10 months. Think about what 37 weeks actually looks like. That's not a weekend project that stretched out. That's sustained, consistent, grinding work over the better part of a year. Structural repairs, roof sections, electrical rewiring, plumbing installation, walls rebuilt from scratch in some areas, flooring laid over floorboards that had been missing entirely, and all of it documented on camera, week after week, for an audience that grew with every upload. There were cold weeks. North Dakota winters are not mild. There were budget moments. The renovation ended up costing around $40,000, roughly $10,000 more than Tia's original estimate. There were problems that required solutions she hadn't researched because she hadn't known they were coming. Brad was there for the hard weeks, not just the photogenic ones. That's what gets missed when people tell this story as a real estate transformation. The transformation wasn't just architectural. She never talked about this publicly. Until now, Tia's audience grew fast. The comments section on her videos tells you everything about why. People kept writing variations of the same thing. They called her brave. They called her inspiring. They said watching her figure things out gave them the courage to attempt something similar in their own lives. Subscribers in their 60s and 70s said they found her videos genuinely motivating. That's an unusual demographic for a young female creator in a renovation niche. But it makes complete sense when you understand what the channel actually represents. It's not really about houses. It's about the decision to do something that doesn't come with guarantees. Tia left a stable job in a city she knew. She moved to a state where she knew almost no one. She bought a condemned building for $1 with her own savings on the line and no professional safety net. And the thing that made that survivable, structurally, practically, emotionally, was having someone in her corner who was there because he chose to be. Brad Weston is not a recurring character in the way that some family members appear in renovation channels. He's not a co-host. He doesn't have his own merchandise. He shows up in the videos when there's a job to be done, and then he's working. That's the dynamic. A father who doesn't need to be the story. He's just there to make sure the story gets finished. There's a reason that resonates with people across every age group. Most people who follow this channel have had someone like that in their life, or they've wished they had. At this point in the story, most people walked away. What she did instead is the part nobody talks about. Moving into the finished house was not the end of the project. It was the end of the first phase. Tia had been clear from early in the process that the $1 house was part of something larger, a philosophy about what small towns in rural America are actually dealing with. She described driving through her town and counting the empty properties, houses that hadn't been lived in for years, some for decades, structures that communities had quietly written off as too far gone. I live in such a small town, and there are so many houses here that are just sitting empty for years and years, she said. My goal is to bring them back to life and get people living in them. And every time I do that, or someone else in the town does that, it really helps out the town a lot. That's not a content strategy. That's a mission statement. And true to it, she didn't stop at one house. Her second North Dakota project was a property that had been sitting completely untouched since December 2005. The previous owner had passed away that year, and the house had been frozen in time ever since. Cigarette butts still in the ashtray, dishes sitting on the drying rack, a calendar still pinned to December 2005, 20 years back. She purchased that house for $15,000. This time, the foundation was crumbling. Plaster was falling off walls. In certain rooms, you could see straight down into the basement through damaged flooring. She described some areas as genuinely unsettling to walk through. Her dad was there for that one too. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. The title of this video asks a specific question, and it deserves a specific answer. There are easy answers. Brad showed up because that's what parents do. He showed up because Tia needed structural help she couldn't hire cheaply in a rural area. He showed up because the project would have taken far longer, possibly failed entirely, without someone who understood load-bearing walls and roofline repair and how to assess what could be saved before you committed money and time to it. All of that is true, but the less visible answer is this. Tia Weston had walked away from the conventional script. She hadn't stayed in Louisville. She hadn't kept the safe job and the manageable mortgage and the life that was supposed to make sense. She had taken a bet on herself in a very public, very documented, very exposed way. That kind of decision, where you strip out the safety net and go anyway, looks different depending on who's watching. To strangers, it looks courageous. To the people who love you, it can look frightening. Brad Weston didn't follow his daughter to North Dakota to rescue her. He went because she didn't need rescuing. She needed a partner. Someone to work the side of the roof she couldn't reach alone. Someone to talk through the structural decisions that had real financial consequences. Someone who could look at a job that was going sideways at 6 p.m. on a Thursday in a North Dakota winter and know how to fix it before the next morning. He was there because she had committed to something real, and real things require real help. The house that was supposed to burn, the one the fire department had already scheduled, is now a finished home. It has a completed kitchen, a working bathroom, repaired walls, a sound roof. Tia lives there. She bought it for $1 and spent $40,000 making it everything she saw on the day she walked in for the first time. None of that happens in 37 weeks without Brad. And here's what the comments kept asking. And here's the answer they never got, until now. The real reason her dad never left her side isn't because the project needed him. It's because she was his kid doing something that took more courage than most people can even imagine. And no good parent drives away from that. Some people move to North Dakota for opportunity. Some move because the math finally works somewhere it didn't before. Tia Weston moved because she decided a difficult life built on her own terms was better than a comfortable life built on someone else's. She's still there. She posts every Sunday. Her second project, that time capsule house frozen in 2005, is currently being worked on. The mission she described early on, reviving every abandoned house in her small town, is one she's actively executing. The channel has grown into something with genuine national reach, a community of followers across every age group who tune in not to watch renovation footage but to watch someone prove something week after week. Her father is still in the picture when the big jobs come around. The question I'll leave you with is this. Tia walked away from everything stable she had built in Louisville and started over in a state where she knew almost no one. Would you have made the same call? Or is that level of risk something you'd only ever watch from the comments?